I'm Jonathan Gerwitz, partner with KGB Texas Communications, and welcome to The Point. Today we're visiting with Phil Green, Chairman and CEO of Frost Bank, and Katie Harvey, Founder and CEO of KGB Texas Communications. And Phil, you're the 2022 Chair of the San Antonio Chamber, and Katie's the 2023 Chair of the San Antonio Chamber. And Phil, thank you for hosting us here with this beautiful view of San Antonio.
You're welcome.
So I mentioned you're finishing up your year as the Chamber Chair. You've had a lot of changes, some big changes this year with the governance of the Chamber. Talk to us about that and some of the accomplishments that you've seen in the last 12 months.
Well, Jonathan, we started out the year with a focus on collaboration and service and grace. And we also wanted to look closely at ourselves and make sure that we were the best version of the Chamber to accomplish our job of being the best voice for a business that we can be. And so I think we really accomplished those things this year. We've done things like begun the process of collaborating with the Austin Chamber of Commerce to finally, I think, begin the promise of what we've been talking about for 40 years, which is let's bring Austin and San Antonio closer together and make ourselves more of the economic powerhouse that we can be. And of course, the thing that you alluded to, which was the change in governance for the organization. We had an organization with a very large board, about 120 people in round numbers. And that was good in a sense in that it had lots of people that it brought in to the party. So lots of opportunities to communicate and collaborate, but it was a little unwieldy for this day and time. So by changing the board of directors so that we continue to have that large organization, that board of investors, if you will, that large 120 advisory board, some would call it, and have that involvement, but yet have a fiduciary board, which we call the executive board now, which will be representative of senior leaders and very demographically and economically diverse group. We thought that we might amplify the voice of business and really do a better job representing business as a voice for good.
And another big change this year in November, Richard Perez, the longtime and well-respected president and CEO of the Chamber, announced that he'll be stepping down at the end of the year. Talk a little bit about Richard's accomplishments.
I think the best thing I can say in summarizing Richard's role is he helped protect business from things that would have slowed it down or harmed us. And then he also helped us do things that were good for business. And that big example of that, I think, is water for this community with the Vista Ridge pipeline, right, which we were able to do. So just two examples of some really big things that he helped us either avoid or he helped us accomplish. And I also think that, just go back to what I was talking about with regard to grace. I just really commend Richard on how he's handled that. He was so thoughtful, and he had left the Chamber in such a good spot with strong new governance, a new strategic plan, new brand campaign, and just said, let's turn that over to somebody else and really just give the board the opportunity to select whatever it is that they need as they enter this new phase. Just a great example of grace on his part.
Katie, those changes with Richard and the accomplishments that Phil talked about, how does that lead into your year as chair of the Chamber Chair?
Well, I think it just leaves, as Phil said, the organization in an incredible place of opportunity and really being able to look to what the future may look like for the San Antonio Chamber. Also, with just the hard work that was done of setting up this executive board and the people that stepped forward and said, I'll serve and I'll be a part of this, really set the bar for, I think, the organization and the seriousness in which we're taking the changes that are being made and the advocacy of business, and to continue with Phil's, I think, thread of grace and service and business as a force for good, really looking at how the business community has positive impact on our greater community and what that looks like moving forward.
We're gearing up for a legislative year in Texas. We already have lawmakers who are pre-filing bills. Talk about the priorities for the San Antonio Chamber during this legislative session.
Sure. Taylor Dawson and the group in the public policy group did an amazing job this year, really gathering what the priorities were, what the needs of the business community were, and our membership, and listening to them. And what we're really focusing on is of course, everyone's focusing on economic development incentives, infrastructure investment, workforce development, and of course, dear to our heart here is the military affairs.
And in March, we'll be sending our annual delegation to Washington, SA to DC.
That's right.
Talk about the process to develop the agenda for SA to DC.
Well, we'll start on that more in January, but that will follow a very similar process of getting the inputs from our membership and ensuring that SA to DC trip, that we have the meetings and we have the priorities as we go to DC and represent this business community.
And Phil, you led a SA to DC mission last spring. What were some of the wins or highlights of that trip?
The highlights for me were, goes back to collaboration, right? Well over 100 people from the San Antonio area up in Washington making our voice heard. But I'll tell you the other thing that I saw, and it was really, I think, powerful to me, was I got to see the relationship this city has with the military. And I got to be in meetings where military leaders were talking to the representatives of the chamber. They knew them on a first name basis. They had served together in so many ways. All of them had come through San Antonio, it seemed like, at some point or another. And they really encouraged us to make our voice heard so that people in Washington will remember this city of San Antonio that's a little bit far away.
And doesn't have a direct flight.
And doesn't have a direct flight. And would, but they wanted to be here, and they understood the power of being here. So it just helped demonstrate to me what I think is one of the superpowers of the chamber, which is the military connection and its ability to really foster those relationships and help us with those missions.
Phil, you also, among other things, you served on the Federal Reserve Board's Federal Advisory Council for the 11th District. What's your sense of the state of business in Texas and in San Antonio, and what do we need to do to keep businesses thriving?
Texas is doing a good job with business and the state of business, but I think there's some three things we particularly need to keep our eyes on. And one is that the Fed's got to bring inflation down. Inflation's tough on business, it's tough on consumers. We've got to do something about labor. And that's part of the job of the chamber with workforce development and frankly immigration, a smart immigration policy that can help with labor and capacity there. So then we need to do something to keep labor free, and we also need to not go overboard on regulation. Regulation is important, but we need to not make it such that it really inhibits business and the ability to get things done in Texas.
Phil, one of the things that you've talked about a lot over the last 12 months is this idea of business as a force for good in the community. Elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, I'm just a businessman, and I've been in business in San Antonio for 45 years now. It's been my experience. It's made lives better, and I believe it can. And I'll give you an example. When I was a kid, I was a teenager in Victoria, Texas, building apartment complexes, or helping build it. I was a carpenter's helper there. Nobody wanted you to get hurt, but you didn't hear a lot about safety. Businesses have made workplaces safer, and I'll argue that they're more just, and we've saved lives. And so without making a huge cause about it, just the daily work of business towards taking care of people and helping their employees has saved lives and has helped families. So you can apply that to so many different areas. Take corporate partners for racial equity that we announced in the last year and a half or so. We know we can't solve all those issues, but we can say yes to helping. And when you raise your hand as an organization, say, well, I'll help. Yeah, Frost Bank will help with that. Spurs will help with that. HEB will help with that. It increases the focus in your own organization.
And Katie, I know you're a strong believer in this.
Yes.
What's your view of how business can continue to be a force for good in our community?
You know, I think it goes back to something that you're very, very familiar with, and that is within the agency of KGB Texas. I mean, we have chosen over the last many years to only work with clients and on projects that have positive impact in our community. And I think that same extension is what Phil is talking about, and what I want to focus on moving forward in 2023 is working, you know, together as a business community to have a positive impact on our larger community.
You're both well-known, respected leaders in the community, in the business community, and otherwise. But I don't think the two of you knew each other very well before you started working together on chamber leadership. Phil, anything about Katie that has surprised you as you've gotten to know her?
Well, you're right, I did know Katie. I knew her by reputation, and she has a great reputation. And as I've gotten to know her, I've gotten to know her as a great leader and somebody who's very competitive. And if you don't know it, I know you know it, but she is a national champion horsewoman and an Arabian breeder, so she knows how to compete, and she's good convening people, and she's tough. I say she's my muscle on the chamber. So.
And Katie, same question. Anything that's surprised you that you've learned about Phil?
You know, we didn't know each other very well, and I did joke early on that you know, as Phil's position here at Frost as chairman and CEO of a publicly traded company, he has to sometimes be a little more cautious on moves and things like that, and that's not the case for me. And so I think we make a great 1-2 together. But I think what I didn't know about Phil and what I have enjoyed so much this year in working with him is just the grace and the fact that Phil always has such a calm and thoughtful approach to everything that he does. So it's been an incredible year, and I don't think that someone could be successful coming in as a chairman of the chamber unless they had a year like we've had together, so that you learn, because there's a lot to learn.
Well, Katie, thank you, and Phil, thank you, and thank you for hosting us here at Frost Tower, and thank you for joining us on The Point.